The first time I saw my father's name in the old files, it was on a line that ended in failure. Senior Engineer Utkin present. Containment breach projected. Recommend immediate shutdown of object gate. The briefing room was a concrete box buried under a newer UN complex outside Moscow. No windows, just a table, a monitor on the wall, and a pair of officers who watched me more than they watched the screen. I ran my thumb along the edge of the printed transcript. The paper was freshly issued, but the words on it came from a knight older than I was. On the screen, grainy footage rolled. Black and white, timestamp in Cyrillic in the corner. A corridor of poured concrete, frost around the door seams, snow blown in through an open hatch somewhere off camera. Men in Soviet uniforms lined up with rifles, faces hard and pale. A captain in a fur cap stepped into frame. He shouted an order. The audio crackled, but I caught fragments. Object gate. Prepare. Repeat fire. Beyond them, through a thick, circular doorway, something shimmered. It looked like air above a hot road, except this was underground and deep in winter. The surface of it flexed and swayed, as if a curtain made of glass was being pushed from the other side. My gut tightened. This was the original Station Moroz footage they had briefed us on in summary only. Seeing it was different from hearing the words Einstein-Rosen Bridge in a lab report. That phrase made it sound polite. On the screen it just looked wrong. A short tunnel carved into the world where nothing belonged. A uniform brushed my elbow. "Keep going," General Mikhailov murmured. He was the Russian representative on the UN Anomaly Response Council. Narrow shoulders in a blue suit, grey hair clipped short. Beside him, Colonel Adler from UN Command in Geneva sat very still, hands folded, face like carved wood. I advanced the transcript. More lines from the station commander. Pressure readings, stray gravitational spikes. Talk of a geothermal shaft that provided almost free power once you got past the drilling. Then the tone shifted. Objects emerged from gate, height variable, armor unknown, faces obscured, no known insignia. On the monitor, the gate brightened, then settled into something almost like a vertical pool. Through that surface, figures stepped. For a heartbeat, they were blurred, mid-transition. Then they were in the corridor, real and solid. They wore heavy suits built from overlapping plates with pieces bolted on like surgery done with a welding torch. Their helmets were bulbous, with thick, dark visors. Cables and tubing ran along their limbs. Not horns, not claws, nothing folkloric. Just gear. Crude, improvised, ugly gear. They moved with the careful stiffness of men who hurt in every joint. The captain yelled again, language sharper now, rifle raised. The newcomers turned toward him, hands lifted, palms open. One pointed to his helmet, then to a microphone on the wall. The gesture was unmistakable. Talk. The transcript's last clear lines. Object spokesman appears to understand Russian basics. Repeats not enemy, later listen. Visuals suggest extensive thermal burns on exposed skin. Armor is partially fused. Our men report smell of burnt meat and engine oil. Troops on edge. Orders from Moscow. Treat as hostile incursion until proven otherwise. On the screen, some poor conscript coughed and shifted his weight. A rifle barrel bobbed. One of the armoured men flinched. Someone fired. In the narrow corridor, the gunfire was a continuous tearing sound. The armoured figures staggered as rounds struck plating and the vulnerable joints between. One dropped to his knees, arm hitting the floor at an angle that broke something inside the suit. Another reached forward as if trying to grab the camera itself. The feed cut to snow outside, a distant plume of steam, then black. I let my hand fall from the table. My throat felt dry. My father was there. He signed off on this report. Senior Engineer Utkin designed half the geothermal systems in that complex, Mikhailov replied. Station Moroz existed because of him, so did Object Gate. I turned a page. The next entries were short and increasingly frantic. Rising power levels, containment failures, An order to flood the gate chamber, not carried out in time. Then nothing. The log simply stopped, as if the hand that wrote it had been snatched away. I tapped the folder. Why now? Adler finally moved. He uncrossed his hands and nudged a remote, bringing up a satellite image beside the paused footage. A stretch of Siberian tundra, a blur of white and grey, cracked open along a dark line. The permafrost has been thawing faster than the old models predicted, he said. 2 months ago, a section collapsed and exposed part of Station Moroz. Russian scouts went in and came out with stories about metal doors, old Soviet insignia, and strange heat signatures below the frost. We thought it was an old weapons dump. We secured the area, sent in a joint team to survey. They found the geothermal shaft still warm and the outer levels mostly intact. And then they found this control room. He nodded toward the screen. The equipment was dead, Adler added, but the layout matched the declassified drawings you have in front of you. And in a safe half-flooded, we found that film and those logs. And you want me there because my father worked on it, I said. Partly. Adler's gaze settled on me. Partly because you are the only Russian-born officer we have at your rank who can read those logs without a translator, carries current clearances on both sides of our partnership, and has commanded men under fire. He leaned back. And partly because you are stubborn. When we tell you to be careful, you will be careful. When we tell you to retreat, you will retreat. Until you are sure that is the wrong order. That landed harder than any compliment. He knew me too well. Mikhailov touched the screen, enlarging the frozen frame of the armored figures raising their hands. My predecessors called them demons, he said. They wrote that word in private letters. They asked the church to send priests. 50 years later, we look at this and we see armor built out of junk and desperation. Not horns, not tails, men in pain. He turned back to me. Whatever they were, they came from the other side of that thing, and we do not know if that thing is still there under the ice, still connected to wherever this future or other place is. You will go to Station Moroz as the ground commander of the UN team. You will assess the threat. You will keep that team alive. And if there is still a gate, you will tell us whether it is a door we can close or a bridge we have already crossed. I looked at my father's name one more time. The line about recommending shutdown was underlined in blue pencil, probably by some archivist decades ago. No one had listened to him then. I will take the mission, I said. No one needed to write that down. Everyone in the room already knew. The flight north was long enough to numb me if I let it, so I did not. I worked. Over the next day, between aircraft transfers and security checks, I memorized every map, diagram, and grainy photograph of Station Moroz that the archives and our analysts could give me. The complex was built above a deep borehole, a single narrow shaft that went down until it hit a pocket of heat. They had lowered pipes and turbines, tapping that heat to drive their experiments. The gate chamber sat directly above the shaft, anchored in solid rock. From there, corridors fanned outward to barracks, labs, and maintenance tunnels. On the last hop, in a troop helicopter beating its way through low cloud, Sergeant Amir Haddad slid his headset into place and leaned toward me. Looks like a good vacation spot, Major. He jerked his chin toward the small, frosted window. I can feel the beach calling. Amir was older than me by a few years, lean and rope-hard. He had been with me through desert patrols and urban raids, through quiet years where nothing much happened, and one border clash that almost lit the world on fire. When I nominated him as senior non-com for this unit, no one objected. Try not to fall in love, I answered. The locals are not friendly. We saw the film on the way to the airfield. He rubbed a gloved thumb along the edge of his rifle. Demons in scrap armor. I had tickets for something else. They are not demons. He shrugged. Armor, demons, whatever. They bleed or they do not. That is what matters out here. The pilot's voice came through our headsets, clipped and calm. 5 minutes to station. Expect ground wind from the north. Visibility fair. You will feel some chop. Copy, I answered. Beneath the rotors, the world resolved into jagged lines of dark rock and pale thawed earth. Patches of snow clung to shadowed slopes. Meltwater carved brown channels toward a distant river, leaving the tundra sagging and uneven. The station appeared as a series of low concrete structures collapsed in places and buried in others. A few new prefabricated shelters stood near them, marked with UN blue and Russian tricolour. Smoke from generator stacks trailed sideways in the wind. The helicopter dropped, buffeted by gusts. For a moment we skimmed just above a field of fractured ice. Cracks ran like dark veins through it, some wide enough to swallow a truck. Then we were over a makeshift landing zone. Metal plates laid in the mud, men in winter gear hunching against the rotor wash. We hit hard enough to rattle my teeth. The side door rolled open, cold knifed in, sharp and immediate. As I stepped down, my boots sank a little into the plates. Beneath them, the ground was no longer sure of what it wanted to be. The air carried a heavy, damp bite, like old basements and thawed earth after too many years trapped under weight. A stocky Russian officer in a field jacket pushed through the rotor wash. His cap tried to escape, and he clamped a hand over it. Major Utkin. He offered a gloved hand. Colonel Pasha Koval, site security. We shook. Good to finally see more than 3 clips of your briefing, Koval went on. You brought a full circus. Behind me, our squad was already moving, Amir barking quiet instructions as they unloaded crates and gear. Drones in folded travel cases, portable radiation meters, enough medical supplies to set up a small clinic. Where is the ring? I asked. Koval's expression sobered. He jerked his head toward the cluster of concrete mouths beyond the landing zone. Buried, mostly. We dug out an access tunnel to the outer control rooms. The main gate chamber is still sealed behind original blast doors. Our engineers want to go slow. Your people want to go fast. I try not to get crushed between them. He glanced at my collar tabs. Come, the scientist is in the control room. He has things he wants to show you before they break for lunch and fight over formulas. We cut across the muddy ground, passing temporary antenna masts and coiled cables. Our boots left prints that filled with thin water before the wind scoured them. Up close, the remains of Station Moroz looked less like a base and more like a half-buried shipyard. Massive concrete slabs tilted at odd angles, rebar exposed like ribs. Some walls had held, though, and where they had, crews had cut access doors and run fresh power lines. Inside, the temperature rose enough for my breath to stop smoking. The corridor we entered had old Soviet hazard signs still bolted to the walls. Triangles, stylized explosions, skulls. Beside one faded red line of text, someone had taped a newer laminated card translating it into English for the UN contingent. No unauthorized access to Object Gate. The concrete here was stained in long streaks where meltwater had run and frozen and run again over decades. A ceiling panel sagged just enough to make me want to duck. Midway down, we passed an emergency shower, bolted awkwardly between 2 doorways. The piping above it ran into the wall, marked with the gate symbol. You would not believe how many of those we found, Koval muttered. Some old safety officer must have loved them. There is a wash station outside the reactor control room, another outside the chamber doors. They expected spills. What kind of spills? Amir asked from behind me. Koval's boots scuffed. The logs talk about coolant and something they call event discharge. I am not a physicist. Professor Volkov will tell you a long story if you let him. Then we will not let him, Amir murmured. The corridor opened into a wide room that must once have been the facility's nerve center. The original consoles still lined the walls, heavy steel desks with rows of chunky switches, gauge clusters, and tiny square screens. Soviet engineers had built their control rooms to survive shocks and incompetent operators, sometimes in that order. Now, new equipment sat atop and among the old. Flat monitors, portable servers with UN markings, cable bundles looped from the original panels to black boxes that translated analog signals into something modern machines could read. A tall, thin man with hair that stuck up in stubborn tufts stood at the center, peering at a monitor through thick glasses. He wore no uniform, just a thermal shirt with a faded university crest and cargo pants tucked into boots. "Professor Volkov," Koval called. "Your guests have landed." Volkov glanced up, blinked at me, and pushed his glasses up with a knuckle. "You are Utkin," he said. "The sun." I stiffened. "You read the logs." "I read everything." He waved a hand at the room. "This place is a book written in wires and bad decisions." He grabbed a tablet from the console and tapped it awake. "We brought the reactor up to minimal output last week," he went on. "Just enough to see if the turbines would turn without shaking themselves apart. They did. The shaft still reaches a hot pocket down there. Your father's design was good." He pointed to a bank of large round gauges on the wall. Their needles trembled. "Right now, we are feeding just enough power into the old systems to keep the sensors alive. Nothing else. The main gate assembly is still isolated behind physical cutoffs. We wanted to wait until you were here before we touched them." Amir moved around the room, studying the mashup of eras. "It looks like they parked a museum inside a server farm." "There is a reason we kept the old consoles," Volkov said. "The early experiments showed that the more they relied on digital electronics directly tied to the gate, the more those electronics failed. Screens blew out. Boards charred. The analog systems survived. They are clumsy, but they talk to the gate without frying." "The gate is that rough on anything close," I said. "On anything that tries to interpret it directly." Volkov shrugged. "The math—" Koval cleared his throat. "Professor." Volkov pressed his lips together, remembering the brief. "No theory lectures, not without a direct link to mission decisions." He switched the screen to a simplified diagram instead. A vertical circle marked gate, a shaft dropping underneath, turbines drawn like children's pinwheels. "We opened a few of the original junction panels," he went on, "and we found that even with the reactor shut down, some of the sensors near the gate still registered tiny fluctuations, as if something on the other side is tugging on it." "So the gate might not be dead," I said. "I do not think it ever died," Volkov answered. "I think it went quiet when they starved it. The structure could still be there, waiting for food." That image sat in my mind, uncomfortable and alive. A tunnel in space-time curled up like a hibernating animal, listening for the first crackle of current. "Walk me through your plan," I told him. He summarized in a few sentences. "Step the reactor up to a conservative power level. Watch for a response on the gate sensors. And if they got signs of reactivation, send a drone through before any man." That part, at least, I did not have to argue with. "Fine," I said. "How soon?" Volkov checked a timer on his tablet. "We can begin the ramp in 20 minutes. Less, if you are impatient." "I am not impatient. I am cold, and I would like concrete answers before the next round of politics arrives." Koval grunted something that could have been agreement. I took a slow survey of the room, the old consoles, the new cables, the faces of the men working here. Some were in UN blue, some in Russian winter green, some in civilian wool. All male, all tired in the same way. The kind of tired that came from knowing you were standing next to something that did not care about borders or flags. "Get your team into position," I told Amir. "I want perimeter security on the control room and the approach to the chamber. Anyone without clearance who gets curious during this test goes back to the surface or into a cell." He nodded and moved toward the door, snapping his helmet radio off his belt as he went. I picked up the folder with my father's name on it and slipped it into my pack. Whatever we found here, I did not intend to leave that behind. We did not watch the reactor start. There was nothing to see, just numbers shifting on gauges and a distant rising vibration through the floor as turbines far below us spun up. Volkov monitored the power levels, calling out increments as his team stepped them through the startup sequence. 10% nominal load, no abnormal readings on shaft, temperature stable. His voice took the tone of a man falling into a pattern he trusted. I listened for strain underneath it, and heard none. I stationed myself beside the row of analog gate sensors, crude dials and needle indicators that had been bolted into this wall before I was born. Above them, modern flat screens displayed the same readings in sharper numbers and graphs, but I found myself watching the needles more. At my shoulder, one of our drone operators, Corporal Zorin, stood with a tablet and a folded quadcopter case at his feet. The drone was a simple reconnaissance unit, the kind we had flown over too many front lines. 4 rotors, camera, rangefinders, dedicated transmission link. "Drone will not like the radiation if there is any," Zorin murmured, "but it should hold together long enough for a look. That is all we need." Volkov lifted a hand. 30%. Gate sensors reading baseline plus... There. Look. The second dial from the left used to sit at dead center. Now its needle nudged upward by a hair's width, then another. The screen above it translated that motion into a line that ticked higher. I remembered the commander's note in the archive. Rising fluctuations at minimal power. Structure persists without active feed. The hair on my forearm stirred under my sleeve. Another gauge stirred. Then another. Zorin shifted his weight as if fighting the urge to take a step back. "What is that?" he asked. Volkov did not look away. "It is pressure. Like pulling a rope that is fixed to something on the other end, deep in the dark. For years it hung slack. Now it begins to tighten." He glanced at me. 40%. I turned to Koval. "Any unusual readings on the outer sensors? Seismic? Electromagnetic?" "Nothing outside expected noise." He frowned at his own console. "The ground is grumbling, but it has been doing that for years. The melt does not make anything quiet." "Gate chamber doors?" I asked. "Sealed," he answered. "Manual locks engaged. If the gate wakes and sneezes, it will do so into its own room, not into ours." Volkov touched his tablet to mark the current state. "We hold at 40%. No need to go higher yet. If the gate will react, it will react." We waited. It is strange how loud a room becomes when everyone is trying not to speak. Chairs creaked, someone coughed. A pen clicked once, then was stilled by a glare. The needles climbed by another small increment, and then settled, no longer jittering. On the far wall, a bank of old status lights that had stayed dark since we arrived clicked to life, one after another. Red, green, amber in patterns whose meaning only the original designers fully knew. Volkov moved fast now, fingers tapping switches on the vintage console itself, bypassing his own modern equipment. "This one connects the gate sensor feed directly to the chamber cameras," he explained. "If there is light on the other side, we will see it. If there is not, we will at least see how the gate forms." Koval glanced toward me. I gave a small nod. "Do it," I told Volkov. He flipped the switch. For a heartbeat, every monitor in the room showed only static and faint shadows. Then an image snapped into focus on the central screen. A circular room, walls lined with heavy support struts, concrete patched with plates. The far wall dominated by a round structure framed in steel. Within that circle, air rippled, bright at the edges and deepening toward the center, as if someone had drilled a hole in the world and left it filled with water that did not obey gravity. Frost crusted the floor near the threshold, thick and uneven. It looked like a pond in winter where someone had walked a few steps out and then stopped forever. "Gate chamber," Volkov whispered. "Far side." "How do you know it is the far side?" Koval asked. Volkov zoomed the image with a keystroke. "Because the support struts are reversed. They lean the other way. The builders mirrored the structure to counterbalance the stresses. That was in the design notes. Here our struts lean left. There they lean right." He smiled, brief and almost childlike. "We are looking from this station into another identical station." The room on the screen was in worse shape than ours. Patches of concrete had spalled away. One section of the ceiling had dropped, leaving a jagged hole. Through that gap, grey light filtered down from somewhere above. Snow had blown in and half buried a bank of equipment. Ice glazed over broken cables that snaked across the floor. "Radiation?" I asked. A UN tech at the back, scanning his panel, lifted a hand. "Higher than outside," he reported. "Not immediately lethal for short exposure, but nothing you want to spend a holiday in. There is residual fallout, maybe more farther out." "Any motion?" Amir's voice came through my headset from the corridor. I watched the screen. Nothing moved inside the chamber, not even dust. The only sign of life was the slow shift of the gate surface itself. "Chamber appears empty," I answered. "No contacts visible." "Yet," Amir muttered on the link. Zorin nudged his drone case with a boot. "Permission to launch, Major." I weighed the view, the readings, the rubble. "Launch," I said. "Keep it close at first. No heroics." He knelt and unpacked the quadcopter, fingers sure from repetition. The unit unfolded with clicks. Once armed and checked, he set it on the floor. In the corner of the screen, a small picture-in-picture appeared, the drone's onboard camera showing our own control room from floor level. Zorin piloted it up through the open hatch in the ceiling that led toward the sealed gate chamber on our side. We watched its progress in split view, one window showing the drone moving through our tunnel, the other showing the far side chamber through the gate. In our feed, the concrete of the passageway grew rougher as we neared the blast doors. In the far side feed, the gate's surface shifted as if reacting to an approaching touch. "Gate field intensity climbing," Volkov murmured. "Still stable." At the sealed doors, the drone rotated, waiting. "We cut a small aperture at camera height," Koval reminded me. "We can open just enough for that toy to slip through without venting whatever is in there into our faces." "Do it." On a separate panel, a technician threw a lever. In the drone's view, a narrow slot in the blast door slid aside, revealing a slice of the gate chamber beyond. Through the main screen, we saw a matching line of light appear at the base of the structure. Zorin took a breath and guided the drone forward. The drone rose to the correct height, slid nose first toward the opening, and then eased through. Half a second of static, a tremor in the link, then the main screen shifted to take its feed. We were now seeing the far side chamber through the drone's eyes instead of the fixed camera. "I am inside," Zorin reported, voice a notch tighter. The picture panned in a slow arc. Broken struts, collapsed ceiling section, snow. Beyond the gate, through a damaged doorway, an exterior landscape showed in slivers. Dark shapes sticking up from a plain of ash-stained snow, sky the color of lead. "Take us outside," I told him. The drone obeyed. It glided across the chamber, passing within an arm's length of the gate's surface. For an instant the image warped, colors smearing, but then it recovered. Outside the chamber the damage was worse. Part of the corridor had caved. The drone dipped under hanging concrete, rotors stirring powder from the floor. Then it cleared the threshold and rose. The world beyond the far side station Moroz looked like someone had put out the sun and forgotten to relight it properly. What should have been day was a weak twilight, the light thin and cold. Snow lay in uneven drifts, streaked with grey and black where ash had settled. Twisted metal towers leaned over the plain, some bent nearly double. In the distance, a structure that might once have been a radio mast lay snapped in pieces, its remains sticking out of the ground like broken spears. "Radiation increasing," the tech at the back called. "Still within drone limits, but climbing." "Keep it low and close," I reminded Zorin. "We want a taste, not a full meal." The drone swung in a broad arc. As it rounded the rear of the gate building, the camera caught movement. "Stop!" I snapped. "Zoom there! 2 o'clock! That shadow!" Zorin steadied the drone and drove it a little higher. At first it looked like a heap of metal piled against a wrecked vehicle. Then a limb shifted, and the shapes resolved into 3 distinct figures hunched beside the hull. They wore armor like the shapes in the old film, except more battered. Plates strapped across joints, braces running from thigh to ankle, helmets expanded by welded extensions. The gear was caked in ash and ice. One figure's leg brace had a section missing, replaced with a straight bar of steel and two mismatched clamps. They were watching the gate building. Their heads turned in unison toward the drone's faint whine. "Contact!" Amir's voice snapped in my ear. "I see them!" "Do not fire," I answered. "They are on the far side. Drone only." One of the armored men raised a hand toward the drone, shielding his visor from the sky. His exposed skin between glove and sleeve was mottled, puckered by old burns. When he shifted, his whole frame moved with the careful slowness of someone who knew that a sudden motion might tear something inside. Zorin eased the drone back. "Range?" I asked. 50 meters from gate building," the tech replied. "Radiation at that point would cook us in an hour without shielding." "Signal strength?" "Dropping, but still usable." On the screen, the three figures began to move. One tapped another's shoulder, then pointed toward the gate chamber. They started toward it, limping and uneven, but with clear purpose. "They know we are here," Amir said quietly over the link. I watched them advance across the ash-streaked snow. There was nothing supernatural about them. They were men bent under weight and injury, wearing armor built out of whatever their world had not yet consumed. Demons only to someone looking for them. "Bring the drone back," I ordered. "Route it out and through. I do not want to lose it to a stray shot, and I do not want to give them a target." Zorin complied. The drone swung back toward the chamber, making a shallow descent. As it crossed the threshold, the feed jittered again, then steadied. A moment later, it slid through the narrow slot in our blast door and dipped back into our side's passage. We watched the central screen now, not as explorers, but as men at a window. On the far side, the three armored figures reached the chamber. They moved inside, boots crunching on ice. One knelt and ran a gloved hand along the inner frame of the gate. He looked up toward the fixed camera. Right at us. Even through the distortion and the visor, I felt the weight of that attention. Not malevolent, not kind, just focused. He lifted his hand and formed a fist, then splayed his fingers twice in a quick signal. Some old infantry gestures looked the same in every army. He was counting how many of us he thought were on this side. Static washed over the image. For a breath, the screen filled with crawling grey. Then the picture returned with a harsh line across it. "Field instability," Volkov muttered. His fingers flew over his console. "The gate is changing." On the radiation panel, values began to drift upward. "Major," Koval called. "We are getting leakage on the near side monitors. Not a lot, but more than before we started this." The three armored figures were talking now, helmets close together. One pointed toward the gate surface, then toward the ceiling, then toward the camera again. Their movements were urgent. "We shut down," I told Volkov. He hesitated just long enough for me to feel irritation flare. He hit the cutoffs. The power output indicators began to fall. The needles on the gate gauges sagged, then trembled back toward baseline. On the screen, the bright shimmer within the ring dulled, collapsing inward until it was just a faint disturbance. The image from the far side remained for a count of 3, then vanished, replaced by the blank view of our own sealed doors. A murmur ran through the room. "Radiation back to pretest background," the tech announced. "No spike." I let the breath I'd been holding ease out slow. Old habits die hard. Amir's voice came through my headset again. "Contact lost?" "For now," I said. "We shut it down. They are still there, whether we look at them or not." Volkov slumped a little, shoulders dropping. "So," he murmured, "we have confirmed that the gate still links our station Moroz to another station in a world that has seen a nuclear winter. And we have confirmed that someone on that side is watching." He straightened and turned to me. "What now?" For a moment I thought of my father, underlining that recommendation to shut the device down. I thought of the armored men lifting their hands in the old footage and being cut apart anyway. I thought of the 3 broken figures we had just seen, trudging through ash toward the one opening left between their world and ours. "Now I talk to command," I answered, And then we decide how far we are willing to walk through that door. The call from Geneva came through on a secure line an hour later. I summarized the test in clean, clipped phrases, leaving out nothing important and nothing that might give someone a reason to drown us in more oversight. When I finished, there was a long pause. I pictured Adler on the other end, weighing words against risks. "You have seen the footage," he said at last. "You have seen the other side with your own eyes. Is your assessment unchanged? This is Earth, a future Earth." "Yes," I answered. "The geography matches. The construction details match. The radiation profile matches a world that burned itself." "And the entities you observed?" "Human," I replied. "Or human once. Injured, armored, cautious. They approached the chamber. They knew the gate. They knew someone might be on this side." Another pause. "General Mikhailov and I are in agreement," Adler went on. "We cannot leave this a drone-level observation. We need more than a few minutes of video and rough readings. We need samples. We need clearer data. We need to know exactly what those men want and how they relate to the war that broke their world." "I expected that," I said. "You will lead a ground team through on a limited excursion," Adler told me. "Short duration, in and out. Establish local security inside the far side chamber and immediate surroundings. Attempt contact only if you can do so without jeopardizing your men." "Understood?" My hand tightened on the handset. "Understood. Timeline? First light." The word meant little this far north, but it gave us a few hours to prepare. We will need time to check suits and equipment for the radiation levels we saw and to brief the team. "Then first light it is," Adler replied. He paused once more. "Lev," he added, using my given name for the first time since the briefing room. "This decision will be reviewed and second-guessed by every government that signed off on this mission. But it is yours out there. If you judge that the risk is too high, you withdraw. We cannot afford to lose the only man who has seen both the past and this possible future of Station Moroz." "I will do what the situation requires," I said. I hung up and looked around the control room. Amir stood in the doorway, helmet off now, dark hair damp with sweat. "Well?" he asked. "Pack your gear. We are going through." Preparation did not take long. We had rehearsed this kind of movement in too many different colors of desert and ruin. Volkov's team checked suits and radiation meters. Amir checked weapons and men. I stood between the old Soviet consoles and the new UN monitors and watched the ring wake up again. The blast doors to the chamber stayed closed. We saw the far side only through the fixed camera, the same broken room and grey light as before. "Power steady at the test level from yesterday," Volkov reported from his nest of switches. "Gate reading stable, field boundary firm." He pointed to a thick cable coil near the wall. "We wired an emergency cutoff directly to the reactor valves," he added. "One lever here. If something goes wrong, you can drop power without asking anyone." I wrapped my hand around the lever's metal grip. Heavy. Real. "Good. If I have to decide fast, I want something that moves." Amir's voice came over my headset. "Team ready at the doors, Major. Suits sealed. Last chance to pretend we did all of this already and tell Geneva the footage was lost." I stepped away from the console and crossed the control room. Men watched me go, some hiding it, some not. At the chamber access, Koval met me with a clipboard and a tight mouth. "You have 6 men," he said. "You, Sergeant Haddad, Corporal Zorin, Medtech Bauer and 2 riflemen. That is enough to move, not enough to fight a war. Remember that." "I do not intend to fight a war," I answered. "I intend to walk in, look, and walk out." He snorted. "I have heard that before." We signed the last paper, more to make the lawyers feel better than because ink would protect anyone. Then Koval thumbed a metal switch that triggered the door mechanism. The blast doors did not glide. They juddered and jolted, grinding apart in short, angry movements. The sound carried through the floor up into my boots. Beyond them lay the chamber we had glimpsed on the screen. The circular room, the ring framed in metal, the air inside the circle moving like clear water in a slow storm. The temperature dropped as we stepped through. It did not feel like normal cold. It felt layered, as if an older chill waited under the first one. My team followed in single file, boots clanking on the grated floor that spanned the shaft beneath. Each of us wore a protective suit rated for radiation and chemical exposure, with a clear visor and extra shielding plates at chest and shoulders. Our rifles were magnet-clipped to our vests. We wanted hands-free during the transition. "Radiation on our side normal," Bauer called from the rear, watching his wrist meter. "Nothing above background." "Do not move past the inner rail until I give the word," I told them. "When we go together. Once you are through, you get off the line of the gate and create a perimeter inside the far side chamber. No one rushes the door." Amir took his place at my left shoulder. He knocked his knuckles lightly against my arm. "After you." The gate up close did not look mystical. It looked like a vertical circle of air pretending to be still and failing. When I leaned in slightly, I could see a faint distortion, like looking through thick glass at a room lit from the wrong direction. Static prickled along the edge of my visor. Volkov's voice came over the chamber speakers. "Field intensity holding. Passage is open and stable, at least as far as a man's body is concerned. Instruments survive, drones survive. You will survive if you do not dawdle." "Comforting," Amir muttered. I stepped forward until the toes of my boots touched the recessed metal band at the base of the ring. A strip of old paint there, long faded, still showed the Soviet symbol for boundary. "Utkin," Adler's voice came through the secure channel from Geneva. Clear, detached, half a world away. "You are authorized to proceed. Mission timer begins when you cross." I did not respond. I already knew the mission timer would mean less to me than the look on my men's faces if I kept them out in that world too long. I drew in one breath to control the muscles that still remembered what fear felt like as a child waiting for a father who never came home. Then I stepped into the ring. For half a heartbeat, everything narrowed to pressure and noise. My skin tightened under the suit, as if someone had pulled it in all directions at once. My inner ear spun. Every bone in my feet felt heavier and lighter in the same moment. Then my boot came down on solid concrete again. I staggered one step forward, caught myself and turned. The gate behind me was now the other side of the same circle, the surface still rippling. Through it I saw our original chamber in mirror. Volkov and his consoles, the glow of monitors, Koval watching with his arms folded. Amir emerged beside me, moving with a jerk like a man stepping off a ladder onto uncertain ground. Then Zorin, then the others. Each man flinched at the transition, then found balance. "Check in," I called. They answered, in order. No tremors in their voices that did not belong there. The sensors on my HUD analyzed the air as sharp and burned, full of particulate from insulation that had overheated a long time ago. The chemical traces clung to the metal, more memory than current threat, but they still told me what this room had been asked to endure. "Radiation?" I asked. Bauer looked at his meter. "Higher than our side, but still within safe levels for a short stay," he answered. "Hours if we are unlucky, longer if we stay away from any hotspots." The chamber matched the feed, cracked concrete. Snow drifted through a hole in the ceiling, patches of frost in uneven spreads. Old equipment slumped along the walls, half buried. A set of steps led down to a lower platform, where an old Soviet emblem peeled away from the wall in curls. Near the pre-drilled bolt holes at the base of one support strut, a shape lay crooked on the floor. When we got closer, I saw it was a body in a decayed Russian uniform, bones mostly bare inside shreds of cloth. Amir paused over it. "Station crew," he murmured. "He did not make it far." "No one did," I answered. We cleared the room in methodical sweeps, rifles ready even when we did not expect company. The only movement came from fine snow shifting under drafts from the hole above. "Exterior doors," I said. Zorin pointed toward the far side of the chamber, where a heavy blast door stood half open, crushed by something that had fallen on it from above. Beyond its bent frame lay a corridor that sloped upward, clogged with rubble but passable. "That should lead outside," Zorin added. We moved toward it, stepping carefully over broken concrete and frozen puddles. The atmospheric reading showed the air was dry and thin. The light from the sky did not reach this far properly. It fell in jointed rectangles that left gaps of shadow between them. "Stack at the door," Amir ordered quietly. "Standard exit. Utkin and I first, then Zorin with the drone controller, then the rest. Bauer, you stick center. You go down. We all go down slower." Once we were in position, I signaled for Zorin to launch his drone again. He tossed the small quadcopter through a gap in the door wreckage, bringing it up fast enough to clear the obstruction but slow enough not to hit the ceiling. The feed popped up on his wrist tablet, which he slotted into a bracket on his forearm so we could all see. Outside, the world looked worse from ground level than it had from the drone's earlier flyover. The sky was a uniform smear of grey with no clear source of light. The ground near the building was a mix of cracked concrete and snow. The snow stained dark in streaks as if someone had ground coal into it by hand. Wind moved in gusts that barely stirred our suits, but carried small currents of loose ash across the surface like dry waves. "Radiation rising outside," Bauer warned. "Still within our gear's limits for the planned window, but I would not plan a picnic." "We will not stay longer than we have to," I answered. We watched for shapes. The drone's camera panned slowly across the surrounding area. The remains of the gate structure on this side loomed behind us, its roof partly collapsed. Beyond it, where the tundra should have stretched flat, the ground was broken into shallow ridges and pits. Twisted metal towers rose here and there, more like dead trees than machines. No movement. "Let us not announce ourselves more than we already have," Amir murmured. "We go quiet, we stay near cover. We get what the professors want, and we get out." "The professors do not get a vote out here," I said. "You and I do." He gave me a look that acknowledged both truth and irritation. "On your order, Major." I raised a fist, then opened it toward the corridor. "Move." We slipped through the broken door and into the passage. Up close, the damage looked handmade. Someone had chiseled chunks out of the walls to brace beams and run cables. A thick cable, newer than the Soviet wiring, hung in a sagging line patched with tape and clamps. It ran towards the gate room, the same kind Zorin's drone had seen wrapped around those armored figures' exoskeletons. "Watch your heads," Amir warned. "If this place comes down, I am haunting the man who designed it." "My father designed it," I said. He glanced back. "Then I will complain to him first." He kept moving. I appreciated that he did not bother to apologize. The passage sloped upward. At the top, a heavy steel door, its hinges warped, had been forced open enough to let a man squeeze through. Beyond it, the drone feed showed the exterior again, now closer. "Go," I told Amir. He slipped through the gap and took position to one side. I followed, ducking to clear the bent edge. The cold outside hit with a different weight. This was not the damp chill of our side's Siberian air. This was the kind of cold that arrived after the sun had been dimmed for years and did not know any other job. We spread out just beyond the door, rifles up, scanning arcs overlapping. "Radiation?" I asked. Bauer checked again. "High but not yet catastrophic," he reported. "We stick to the plan. We are fine. We wander off to sightsee. We come back glowing." "Understood." We advanced in a staggered line, using ruined structures for cover. Our path took us along the side of the gate building, then out toward a raised section of smashed roadway that gave a better view over the surrounding plain. Every step crunched with a mix of snow and something harder. Charred fragments lay underfoot, broken glass, bits of plastic, the occasional spent round. "Zorin," I murmured. "Keep the drone overhead but low. I want early warning if anyone thinks we are interesting." He adjusted the controls. The drone drifted up, hovering at roof height. In the tablet display, we saw our own helmet tops moving like ants among the ruins. For a few minutes, nothing happened. We reached the broken roadway and climbed onto it. From there, the landscape opened. In the distance, what had once been a town sprawled across the plain. Outlines of apartment blocks and industrial sheds half collapsed under their own weight. Many of them had dark streaks on their sides where fire had run up and frozen in place. Further still, silhouettes of taller towers rose, some bent halfway, and held there like fingers frozen mid-gesture. "Range to those buildings?" I asked. 600 meters to the nearer ones, Zorin answered. Maybe more. Hard to trust the depth through this haze. Even the air looked thick. Not in a poetic sense. There were small particles hanging in it, catching what little light existed and turning it into a dull blur. "There is your future," Amir muttered, quiet enough that only I heard. "We should go home and tell them that is enough." He was not wrong. Part of me wanted exactly that. Proof gathered. Mission technically fulfilled. My men alive. Someone in Geneva forced to look at a ruined Earth without any of us having to walk deeper into it. But the armored figures we had seen before were out here somewhere. They watched the gate for a reason. Our brief did not allow us to pretend they did not exist. "Another 30 minutes, I answered. "We push out a little further. We collect samples, and then we go back. If we do not see them, fine. If we do, we decide then." Amir let out a breath that steamed in the air. "You are the one who has to sleep with this." We move. We fanned out along the roadway, picking our way around jagged holes where sections had dropped away. Bauer paused twice to scoop snow and ash into sample bags, marking the spots on a small map. Zorin kept one eye on his drone feed and one on the horizon. The rest of us relied on our own senses, which felt less trustworthy here. It happened when we crossed a wide gap in the roadway where the ground dropped away on both sides. We had to step out from behind a chunk of broken guardrail and move across open ground for about 20 meters. There was no way around it without adding time we did not have. "Two at a time," Amir ordered. "Quick crossing, low profile, no heroic marching." The first pair went, moved, reached the next section of cover. No fire. "Next," I called. I went with Amir. It felt wrong to leave him exposed while I watched. We stepped out, moved in a low trot over the ash and snow. The ground felt uneven, small ridges under the surface from rubble buried shallow. Halfway across, something snapped under my boot. A thin crack, too precise to be a stick. I had just enough time to register that before the world jumped. The explosion was small compared to battlefield charges, but it was close. A sharp, rising roar, a bright flash at ground level, fragments punching up. The blast threw me sideways into Amir. For a moment, there was only hard ground and a rush of dust. My suit alarm shrieked in my ear, complaining about pressure shock and minor outer shell damage. I rolled, pulled my rifle in tight, and crawled toward the far side of the gap. Rounds snapped in from somewhere off to our right, striking concrete and sending chips out in small bursts. "Contact right side elevated," Zorin yelled over the comm. 3, maybe 4 shooters. I reached cover and braced against a broken slab. Amir slid in beside me, gear rattling. "You all right?" he grunted. "Fine. Minor suit damage, no breach." I checked my meter. Radiation was unchanged. Explosion, not a dirty device. "You," ears ringing, pride bruised. Another round slapped the slab near my head. "They were watching the obvious crossing," he added. "Of course they were. I am an idiot." "Plenty of blame later," I answered. "Positions." The rest of the team had already dropped to cover where they could find it. One of the riflemen, Kerimov, lay sprawled on the open ground near the detonation point, one leg at a wrong angle, suit torn at the knee. "Kerimov is down," Bauer's voice snapped. "I can reach him if you give me covering fire." "You have it," I replied. Amir leaned out, fired short bursts toward the likely shooter nests, a fractured wall on the right, the wreck of a vehicle beyond it. I added my own rounds, targeting muzzle flashes more than bodies. Zorin sent the drone higher to get an overhead view. In the drone feed, 3 armored figures showed on the ruined wall. Their outlines matched what we had seen earlier from a distance. Heavy chest plates, braced limbs, helmets with wide, dark visors. They moved quickly but with a stiffness that suggested pain or old injuries. One of them held a compact rifle with a makeshift grip. Another had a tube launcher on his shoulder, likely for those ground charges. 3 tangos on the wall, Zorin reported. Maybe more behind the vehicle. They look like the same type from the chamber feed. Any more explosives laid out? I asked. He swept the drone camera over the ground ahead. Nothing obvious, but they buried at least one good enough to trick us. They know how to hide things. We adjusted fire, working angles that would keep their heads down while Bauer crawled toward Kerimov. Go, I told him. He moved low, one hand on his medkit, the other digging into the ground for traction. Rounds kicked up ash around him, but our covering fire kept most of it high. He reached Kerimov, grabbed the back of his suit and dragged him toward the nearest chunk of broken barrier. Kerimov conscious, he panted. Leg is broken. Outer suit layer torn, inner layer seems intact. No fluid leak. He is yelling too much to be dying. A ragged chuckle came from Kerimov's end of the line. On the wall, one of the armored men shifted position. His leg brace caught on a jag of concrete. For a second, his limb jerked and locked. The man lost balance and dropped down the far side of the wall. This is our chance. We are not just trading bullets with ghosts. We need one of them. Amir glanced at me, trackers in his helmet catching the motion. You want a prisoner, he said flatly. Yes. We will not understand anything if we shoot them all. He bared his teeth in something that was not quite a smile. Fine. You pick which of our people dies for that insight. I kept my answer simple. No one dies if we move fast and keep control. We pin the others and we take the one who fell. He nodded. Zorin, keep eyes on the one who dropped, he ordered. Mark him, Utkin, with me. The rest of you suppress that wall. Short bursts conserve ammunition. We broke cover together and sprinted along the broken roadway, then down an angled chunk towards ground level. Bullets chipped at the concrete behind us as our men opened up in reply. The drone feed in my visor's corner window followed the fallen armored man. He had landed hard in the rubble behind the wall and was trying to rise. One of his leg braces had bent under him, metal twisted where it met the boot. He put weight on it and almost fell again. Up close, he was large, broad through the chest, built more by necessity than training. His armor looked scavenged, parts from different eras welded into one mess. Some plates stamped with old manufacturer logos, others hammered flat from vehicle panels. He saw us coming and swung his rifle up. The movement dragged at his bad leg. I threw myself into a slide behind a chunk of wreckage, feeling grit scrape along my suit. Amir dove in on the other side. We came up in unison and fired. I aimed at his shoulder, trying to hit the joint where armor met muscle. My round struck, punching him back against the broken wall. Amir's shots hit his rifle, shattering parts of it and sending it spinning away. The armored man crumpled to one knee, dropping his weapon hand, free hand grabbing at the damaged leg brace again. He reached for a sidearm with his other hand. Amir lunged from cover, closed the distance in 3 strides, and hit him across the visor with the butt of his rifle. The helmet took the blow, but the man's head snapped back against the wall. He slumped, weapon hand loose. Clear, Amir panted. He is alive. For now. On the wall above, the other 2 shooters realized what we were doing. One of them tried to reposition for a shot down at us. A burst from Kerimov's rifle caught him in the side and sent him sliding out of sight. The third fired a scatter of rounds and then dropped behind the structure, retreating. Within 30 seconds, the incoming fire thinned and then stopped. Targets retreating, Zorin reported. They are moving toward the town, fast as they can manage. Do not pursue. We have what we came for. I crouched in front of our new captive. Up close, I could see details the footage never captured. The armor was charred in multiple places. The surface bubbled and cracked by heat that had once been intense enough to deform metal. The leg brace that had failed him was a simple assembly of rods and plates, bolted around his limb and tied into his boot. It looked like someone had improvised it in a machine shop that never had enough parts. His breathing rasped through the helmet's vent. He raised one hand as if to push himself up, then let it fall. "Bauer," I called. "We need this one alive and sealed." Bauer hustled over with his kit, leaving Kerimov propped in cover with a tourniquet and pain injection. "We will move him back to the chamber," I told Amir. "Shorter lines of fire, lower radiation, and only one variable to manage. Out here we are blind." "We are already blind," Amir grunted. "But fine. Your game, Major." Together we looped straps around the armored man's chest and shoulders. He weighed more than any single man should, armor and suit combining to make every step a grind. But between the three of us, we got him up and moving in a stumbling drag. He did not fight. Once or twice he made a small motion as if to reach for my arm, then aborted it. Maybe he knew better than to give us a reason to drop him. Maybe he simply hurt too much. We moved back along our approach route, this time avoiding every open gap we could. Covered by the rest of the squad, we reached the gate building and squeezed through the damaged door again, dragging our prisoner behind. As soon as we were inside the far side chamber, the air felt less sharp. It was still cold, still dead, but at least the walls gave the illusion of shelter. We laid the armored man down near the inner platform between the ring and the old consoles. Bauer dropped to one knee beside him, checking for obvious bleeding and suit breaches. "Armor took most of it," Bauer reported. "He will hurt, but I do not see him dying in the next hour unless we help." "Good," I answered. "We needed him conscious, not comfortable." "Helmets off," Amir muttered. "That how this goes? We pull the lid and hope he speaks something we understand. First we restrain him, then we pull the lid." We used reinforced binding straps wrapped around his wrists and ankles, cinched tight enough to make the armor creak. We anchored the straps to a support strut with metal clamps scavenged from the chamber's own fittings. Only when I was sure he could not lunge for anyone did I reach for the helmet locks. Up close, the armor pieces around the helmet base showed clear modification. The original seal had been cut and rebuilt with extra brackets, as if the wearer's neck no longer matched the standard. Locks released with a stubborn series of clicks. For a moment, the helmet stuck. Then I levered it up and off. The man's face would have been unremarkable if you stripped away what had happened to him. Middle-aged, broad jaw, dark stubble. But the left side of his face was mapped with burn scars, the skin drawn tight, eye lost under a lid that never fully closed. The right eye pinched shut briefly at the light, then opened, adjusting with slow care. His scalp showed patches where hair no longer grew, the skin there mottled and shiny. A cracked line ran along his cheekbone that looked less like a wound and more like a place where bone had once broken and healed crooked. He licked cracked lips, took in a breath, and focused on me. When he spoke, the words came harsh and rubbed raw, but they were recognizable. "Russian," he croaked, the accent strange but grounded in the same root as mine. "You are Russian." "Partly," I answered. "Also UN." He glanced around, taking in Amir, Bauer, the ring behind us. "UN," he repeated, "United Nations. So we hit the right years at last." The hair rose again along my arms, this time for a different reason. "What is your name?" I asked. He shifted against the restraints, testing them, then let his head fall back. "Name is not important," he murmured. "Names do not survive long where I am from. Call me whatever works for you. The message is what matters." Amir folded his arms. "I am old-fashioned," he muttered. "I like knowing what to put on a grave." The man's working eye flicked toward him and stayed there a beat longer than was comfortable. "You still have the luxury of graves," he said quietly. "Hold on to that." I knelt so I could look him straight on without height games. "You came here before," I told him. "To this place, to this gate. My people shot you. My father was there." His gaze shifted back to me. Something in his expression sharpened. "Senior Engineer Utkin," he murmured. "The records say he tried to shut the thing down. He understood more than his officers did. He died in those corridors when they flooded the chamber too late." He did not say how he knew that. "You have records," I pressed. "From our side. You know names." "We had to learn them," he answered. "We had to know which threads to pull, which men might listen, which would follow instructions printed for them long before they were born." His voice roughened as he spoke, not from emotion so much as from strain. Talking cost him air. "We are losing time," he added. "You have questions. I have answers, but not for long if you keep me strapped like a package and let my leg rot." Bauer bristled. "I can set the leg," he muttered. "But if I loosen those restraints, you will do something stupid and we will all have to shoot you." The man let out a sound that might have been a bitter laugh. "You have not seen stupid yet. You live in a world where stupidity still stops at the border of total fire." He looked back at me. "How close is your sunrise? How many missiles ready on rails? How many war exercises with real warheads just in case?" I ignored the dig. "Where are you from?" I pressed. "Not which gate, which years." His eye narrowed. "You think this is another country?" he answered. "It is not. This is your Earth, Major, many years from now. The records talk about you, about this mission, about the day the gate opened again and brought in a small team with mixed flags." My name in his mouth jolted me in a way I could not afford to show. "You know who I am," I said. He gave a small, stiff nod. "Lev Utkin, son of Alexei Utkin," he replied. "Russian-born, UN-trained specialist in nuclear doctrine and intelligence liaison. You die in one of the earlier branches, if it helps. Not here. Not like this. Different mission, different gate, same pattern." For a moment the chamber felt smaller. Not because of fate or prophecy, but because someone far away had written my death into a file. "How?" Amir demanded. "How do you have any of that? You sit out there in your ash and your ruined towns and what? Hack into our computers." The man's lip curled, pulling his scars into a raw map. "We survive," he answered. "We dig in the ruins of your bunkers. We tear open your black boxes. We find hard drives that did not burn, film that did not melt, handwritten logs sealed under stone. We read everything you ever documented because you thought you were too important not to write it down." He jerked his chin toward the gate. "And when we find this, we find records of what it did once. We find a way to power it from our side. We test what happens when you feed it energy reversed from our ruins. It whines, it shudders, and then sometimes, rarely, it opens. It spits out drones. Sometimes it spits out men in uniform who shoot us on sight." His working eye bored into me. "We learned to come armed after the first attempts. We learned some Russian and some English. We learned that you all think you are the first ones to make every mistake." He coughed, a harsh, tearing sound. Bauer's hands twitched toward his medkit on reflex. "You are from our timeline," I said. "Just later." "Not exactly," he answered. "You are from one of our earlier choices. Every time the war starts or almost starts, the chain of events around this gate shifts. Command structures change. Warnings arrive to deaf ears or are blocked by cowards. The world burns in different patterns, but it always burns. We come back, when we can, to try to kick it off that track." He frowned slightly, concentrating. "You call it branching. Alternate time paths. I do not care what word you use. For us, it means this. Somewhere behind that ring, there is a version of the world that still has oceans and growing fields. We will never see it. But if we do not try, there will be no such place for anyone." I felt the shape of his explanation more than the details. Multiple runs at the same crisis, each one failing differently. Survivors scavenging knowledge, learning to reach backward in a crude way through a single fixed doorway. "And the war?" I forced myself to ask. "Our war, the one that makes your sky that color, when?" He smiled without humor. "Soon," he whispered. "Soon enough that I do not need a calendar. I have the opening moves mapped in my head. A border clash, a misread exercise, an anomaly at a strategic site that your rivals interpret as a cover for launch. Command systems with too many automatic triggers and not enough men willing to pull the plug. He glanced at the ring. This gate, your reactor, your presence here, it is all part of the signal chain. You wake the gate, you run power through the shaft. Your enemies see the spike and the thermal bloom and combine it with their own paranoia. They move to higher alert. Someone somewhere leans on a protocol meant for a different era. And then you all start something you cannot stop. It was not a prophecy. It was a checklist. Prove it, Amir snapped. You can spin stories all day. We need something that is not just your voice and your scars. The man's eye glittered. I brought more than words, he answered. He shifted his shoulders as much as the restraints allowed and nodded toward his chest plate. In there, under the left panel, a data core, hardened storage, solid state, insulated. It holds video, logs, everything we thought might convince you we were not just lunatics in armor. He looked at me. Take it. Play it. Then decide if you want to walk back through your ring and tell your masters that the demons were lying. I glanced at Bauer. Any risk in opening his armor? I asked. It looks like an external mounting plate over the main seal. So unless he has a bomb strapped to his ribs, we are safe. Amir snorted. Comforting trend. We unbolted the left chest panel with tools from Bauer's kit. The armor plate came away with a grunt and a crack of old sealant. Underneath more padding, then a small hard metal block strapped to the suit with wire. I unfastened it and held it up. It was the size of a thick credit card, edges beveled, metal scarred where other straps had once held it to some other carrier. What format? Zorin asked, stepping closer. Can I read that with our equipment, or does it speak only in dead languages? The man on the floor chuckled. We scavenged from your servers. We did not invent something new. Your laptops in the next few decades are not so different that we could not make them talk to this. Plug it into one of your adapters. You will get a directory. We labeled it in 3 tongues so no one could pretend confusion. Zorin took the core with careful fingers and slipped it into a padded pocket. I will hook it into the field rig, he said. Give me a minute to set up. He moved to one of the old consoles where we had placed a portable data unit earlier. A ruggedized computer built for fieldwork, rugged casing, wide connector ports that could handle most storage formats. While he worked, I turned back to our prisoner. You risked your life to bring this, I told him. Your men risked theirs to cover you. You knew the odds of being shot were high. We do not have many lives left to risk, he answered. The world I come from cannot feed everyone it still has. Children are born underground and never see a clear sky. Men like me are not wise elders. We are expendable specialists. He paused to draw another breath, the sound scraping. You asked earlier why now, he added. Why you? The answer is simple. In one of the branches before this, we did nothing. We huddled in tunnels and told ourselves the past was beyond reach. The war had come and gone. It was over. We survived. That was enough. He looked away for a moment, toward the broken ceiling and the dim light beyond. Then the dust shifted again. Another winter collapsed what was left of the crops. Disease walked through the camps. We watched children get smaller each year because their fathers had believed survival was enough. We decided it was not. He looked back at me. You still have a choice. That is the difference between you and me. You can go home and obey orders and let the chain of events run. You can bring this core to your commanders and let them bury it. Or you can do something that will get you stripped of rank and maybe shot, but might give your grandchildren a world that is not ash. That was his one clear articulation of the dilemma, whether he knew it or not. Obedience or the risk of treason in the name of a world he would never see. It sat in my chest like a stone. Utkin, Zorin called. I have it. I crossed to his station. The field unit's screen showed a simple directory structure. The labels were in Russian, English, and a third language I did not recognize. One folder was marked simply War Logs. Another read, Gate Incidents. A third bore a date written in our format, but with a year far beyond my own. Zorin opened the war logs. A list of files appeared, each tagged with a timestamp and a short note. He clicked the first. The screen filled with handheld footage from inside a bunker. Men and women in uniforms and civilian clothes clustered around screens. Their faces were drawn, their eyes ringed with sleeplessness. On the wall behind them, a map showed arcs of missile tracks crossing continents. Some tracks were solid, some dashed, each color-coded. The legend indicated launch sites, targets, times to impact. I watched, barely breathing, as the tracks completed and icons changed color. Some targets went dark, others lit up in brilliant halos. The audio was in a language I barely followed, but the tone needed no translation. Panic, disbelief, orders shouted that could not change anything now. Zorin skipped forward, another file, satellite imagery this time, of cities filmed from orbit as their centers bloomed into harsh light and then cooled into spreading dark stains. Amir turned away. "That is enough," he muttered. "We know what a nuclear exchange looks like." "No," I said. "We know what we imagine it looks like. This is what it looked like for them." I forced myself to watch another clip. Ground-level footage of a street at night. A distant flash. Windows bowing, then shattering. A car lifted and thrown against a building, crushed like a toy. Zorin opened a file labeled Gate Incident 12. Grainy footage, color washed out. A gate chamber like ours, but in worse condition. A group of armored men moved through the ring toward a set of soldiers in older uniforms. They raised their hands, palms open. The soldiers fired anyway. The armored men staggered. One went down. Another reached into his chest plate, as if to pull something free, and took rounds through the arm before he could complete the motion. The clip cut off as rubble covered the camera. "Early attempts," our prisoner called from the floor. "We misjudged your generals. We thought uniforms meant reason. We learned." His voice had grown fainter, strength draining. "Show him the last one," he added. Zorin scrolled to a file labeled with a year about 2 decades ahead of ours, and a note, Casualties, Primary. Inside, a list of names filled the screen, each linked to a brief record. Rank, service, manner of death. It looked like an official casualty database, cached from some military server in that future. Zorin tapped the search field and entered Morozov by reflex. The system took a moment, then returned a single result. My name, rank listed as Colonel, UN Liaison. Date of death about 5 years from my present. Below that, cause of death. Killed during unauthorized attempt to prevent escalation at Station Moroz. Amir's eyes widened. "They have your death certificate," he muttered. "From one of our futures." I read the line twice. Killed during unauthorized attempt to prevent escalation. Not killed in battle. Not killed in an ordinary accident. Killed trying to stop something. It was both a warning and an accusation from a timeline that no longer existed. Behind us, our prisoner coughed again. "In that brunch," he croaked, "you tried too late. You went through the proper channels, sent the data up the chain, obeyed your codes. The people above you spent days arguing about whether it was real. When the exercise started and the anomaly flared and the missiles began to move, you finally broke ranks. You almost stopped it. Almost." He took a shallow breath. "Almost is not enough." Silence settled over the chamber. Even the gate's faint vibration felt distant. I closed the file. "Utkin," Amir breathed. "We have to go back, right now, with this. Whatever this is, Command has to see it." He was right, on one level. The mission timer in my head screamed to retreat. Radiation was still creeping upward. Kerimov's leg needed real facilities. Our prisoner might crash. Every extra minute here raised the odds of something going wrong. But the decision that would matter most would not be made in this ruined chamber. It would be made back on our side, when men in clean uniforms looked at this data and weighed it against their own habits and fears. I looked at the gate. The ring sat quiet now, field stable, the path home open. Then I looked back at the man on the floor, bound and broken, and still somehow more focused than anyone I had left behind in Geneva. "You came here to give us a choice," I told him, "not to dictate what we do with it." He nodded once. "We cannot force you. If we could, the world would not have ended so many times. We can only show you what we paid. Then you decide how much your conscience is worth." He closed his eye, chest rising in shallow lifts. "We are burning through time," Bauer murmured at my elbow. "His vitals are sinking. Kerimov is holding, but not forever. We have to move." He was right. Staying here would not give us any more clarity. It would only give us more corpses. "We are leaving," I called. "Pack up. Zorin, secure that core and a backup copy on the field unit. Bauer, stabilize our guest as much as you can for transport. We are taking him through." Amir rounded on me. "You want to bring him back?" "Yes. He is a walking breach of every security protocol we have. He is also a man who shot at us." "He shot near us. His friends tried to kill us," I countered. "And we tried to kill them. That ledger will never balance. We can talk about it later. Right now, he is the only witness we have who lived through what we are trying to avoid." Amir cursed under his breath in a language I did not share, then exhaled. "You know this will go badly. Command will not thank you for bringing home something they cannot control." "I know. But if I walk away and leave him on this side, pretending that this core alone is enough, I become exactly what I swore I would not. Just another man who followed orders and left a truth in the dark." Amir stared at me for a long beat, then looked away. "Then we better make sure he lives long enough to haunt our tribunal. Form up. Back to the ring now." We moved fast this time, powered by urgency instead of curiosity. Bauer strapped the prisoner's damaged leg as well as he could, and administered a painkiller that would not shut him down. Kerimov hobbled with support from one of the other riflemen. Zorin carried the field unit with the copied data close to his chest like a newborn. As we lined up before the ring, I glanced back at the chamber one last time. The broken ceiling, the drifts of ash-stained snow, the old emblem on the wall peeling away. This was one possible end of our story. A room that outlived the people who built it, holding a doorway onto mistakes they never had the chance to fix. "Utkin," Adler's voice crackled in my ear. Mission time exceeded projected window. "Report." "We have what we came for," I answered. "And more. Details in debrief." "Understood. Return." I raised a hand and touched the inner frame of the ring, just for a moment. The metal was cold and faintly vibrating. Then I stepped through, dragging the future behind me. Coming back through the ring hurt less the second time. The first step landed heavy on our side's platform. I stumbled, kept my grip on the stretcher handle, and felt the weight of the armored man sag between me and Bauer. Behind us, the rest of the team spilled out of the gate field in disjointed motions like film frames out of order. The chamber on our side felt cramped now. More bodies, more equipment. Security units in dark armor ringed the room, rifles already up. I recognized none of them. "Do not move!" one of the new officers barked. His visor hid his face. "Release the unknown subject. Weapons down." Amir shifted his grip on his own rifle, checking himself just before he brought it to bear. "We have a wounded man here. Your unknown subject is the only reason you know anything beyond old film strips. Maybe point fewer guns at the people dragging him in." The officer gestured, impatient. Two of his men rushed forward with a collapsible gurney and a set of restraint cuffs more suited to an animal than a person. They fastened them around the prisoner's wrists and ankles with loud clicks, then hauled him away from us in a rough lift, ignoring Bauer's protests. Our guest's eye tracked me as they pulled him toward the exit. No drama, no plea. Just that rubbed raw focus. "Remember what you promised without saying it." I turned toward the control room. Koval stood in the doorway. On the nearest monitor, Adler's face waited. "Utkin," Adler began, "you will report top level, now." They peeled me away from my men fast after that. standard procedure when command feared contamination of the story. The rest of the squad went to medical and decontamination. I went to a small room with a table, 2 chairs, and far too many listening devices. The debrief lasted through the next hours, or maybe the next day. Fatigue blurred it. I walked them through everything. The Ash world, the ambush, the armored survivor, the data core, the war logs. I summarized the prisoner's account in clean language that would fit nicely into minutes and memos. When they asked how trustworthy I believed any of it was, I told them the truth. His knowledge of our chain of command, my own record and your protocols does not read like guesswork, I said. The material on the core matches known systems and sites. Where it goes beyond what we know, it does so with details someone outside our network should not have. This is not a simple forgery. Some of the examiners were intelligence men like me. They understood the weight of those sentences. Others were scientists who kept circling back to the question of how the gate linked timelines and whether the physics made sense. I gave them as little patience as protocol allowed. The mathematics will not matter if the missiles launch, I told one of them. You will have no labs left to debate in. In the end, they let me sleep for a few hours in a bunk that did not belong to me, and then called me back for the real discussion. Not a debrief this time, a briefing. The secure conference room had 3 walls and a screen for the 4th. On it, Adler and Mikhailov appeared side by side, shoulders nearly touching in the frame, though they were continents apart. Your data core has been through a preliminary authentication, Adler began. Our teams have cross-checked a handful of entries against current classified records. So far, format and metadata line up with our own systems projected forward. Some details match ongoing operations only a small group currently knows. He paused, as if choosing the next words with care. That suggests 2 options. Either your future survivor had access to our deepest files through an improbable penetration of multiple networks, or he is what he claims to be. Then you believe him, I pushed. We believe he is either very real or very dangerous. In neither case can we allow his presence or that core to drive policy on their own. Every major power in the world has run exercises in which an adversary planted highly persuasive false intelligence to push their rival into overreaction. Mikhailov's eyes stayed on me. You are asking us to alter scheduled operations based on information whose origin we do not control. If we do so, and this proves to be a very elaborate manipulation, we weaken our deterrence. That will invite exactly what we hope to avoid. We are days away from a large joint war game in the north. Units are already moving. Our allies watch for any sign we are losing nerve. Our adversaries watch for any sign we are preparing a strike. The discovery of Station Moroz and this gate is already baked into their assumptions, even if they do not know the details. He leaned slightly closer to the camera. We cannot cancel the exercise outright without triggering questions we do not want to answer. We can and will adjust parameters to reduce risk, but we will not surrender the initiative to one scarred man in scrap armor and a drive full of horror. He told us the chain begins with 3 things, I reminded them. Your exercise, a recent border incident, and an anomalous energy spike at Station Moroz that matches a full-power reactor test feeding the gate. You control the 3rd completely. Delay the test. Keep the gate at idle until this window passes. Mikhailov shifted, something like regret passing behind his eyes and settling. Our engineers insist that a full-power test is necessary to assess the long-term stability of the geothermal shaft and the gate's infrastructure, he replied. Delaying it may not be feasible. The longer we wait, the more the meltwater destabilizes the foundations. There is pressure from Moscow and from your own sponsors to gather data while the structure still holds. He took a breath. We will reduce the load, shorten the test window, put additional human oversight on the early warning systems connected to this sector. Beyond that, we do not alter the schedule. It was not enough. It was a cosmetic change dressed as compromise. You are asking me to stand by while you recreate the trigger conditions he described, I said quietly, with only small adjustments meant to make you feel better. Adler's gaze hardened. "We are ordering you to continue your mission, Major," he answered. "Monitor the gate. Assist with containment and analysis. The prisoner is in secure custody. His medical care is being handled by qualified staff. You will not have further direct access to him without authorization." So they had already closed that door. "And if I believe those adjustments are insufficient," I asked, "what are my options?" Adler did not look away. "You can file a formal dissent, which will be recorded as part of the mission history. You can advise on safety measures within your remit, and you can obey your lawful orders. That is all." We held each other's eyes for a while through that thin bit of glass and circuitry. I filed the dissent. It went into a system that had swallowed better protests than mine. Then I went back to work. The next day I found the pattern the prisoner had talked about written in our own schedules. I did not need hacking tools. My clearances as an intelligence liaison opened most of the doors. The rest my rank and a few pointed questions took care of. On one screen, the classified schedule for the Northern War game. Troop movements, missile units moving from storage barns to field positions for training. Flight paths for bomber assets that would carry no live weapons but follow routes as if they did. On another, incident reports from a naval clash a week earlier in a narrow sea to the west. Warning shots gone wrong, a vessel damaged, public statements that sounded like barbed politeness, and behind them a sharp rise in readiness levels. On a third, the reactor test plan for Station Moroz, a full output run scheduled for the midpoint of the exercise, justified as a way to stress systems under realistic conditions while other assets moved. Neatly timed, efficient. I laid them side by side in my head, and they lined up like teeth in a gear. Our adversaries did not know the full nature of the gate, but they knew we had reactivated an old Soviet site that ran hot and fed strange rumors. Their satellites would see the thermal flare from the reactor test and the unusual signatures around the gate. They would see our missiles rolling and our bombers flying. They would see the earlier clash as justification for assuming bad faith. Predictive models inside their own systems, built on our models, would flag this combination as a possible cover for a first strike. Someone with too much faith in automation and too little in human judgment would lean on the wrong protocol. Messages would get misread as proof of aggression rather than attempts to de-escalate. It was not destiny. It was a design flaw in the way we had wrapped the world in sensors and procedures. Once I saw it, I could not unsee it. I drafted another memo, shorter than the last. It laid the chain out in simple terms, tied each link to our own documents, and ended with a direct recommendation. Abort either the full power test or the missile mobilization. I knew before I hit send that it would be received, logged and weighed against career fears in rooms I would never enter. I hit send anyway. Then I went to find Amir. He sat on the spare bunk in my temporary quarters, boots off, socks in his hands. He rolled the socks tight, then loose, then tight again, a small ritual to keep his fingers busy. The room's single strip light cast a pale bar across his face. "You look like a man who just got outvoted by a committee he was not in," he muttered as I closed the door. "That is accurate," I answered. "Move your feet." He dropped his socks and swung his legs down. I took the chair opposite. "Command will not cancel the exercise," I told him. "They will not cancel the test. They will adjust and monitor and trust that their systems will catch any misread signals in time." He snorted. "They will trust the machines to tell them when to panic," he said. "I have seen that before." I laid out the chain for him in stripped form. No theory, just events and timings. The naval clash, the war game, the geothermal spike. By the time I finished, his jaw had set. "This is the same pattern the Ashman described," he muttered. "Different specifics, same shape." "Yes." "And your name in his files." He studied me. "You tried once in some other version. You died for it." He made sure we saw that. "He wanted me to know what it costs to act too late," I answered. Amir leaned back against the wall, head thumping once against the concrete. "What do you want from me, Lev? Because I can see where your thoughts are walking, and I do not like the scenery." I want you to listen. No more than that yet. He waited. If we trust the chain of command to fix this, I went on, we have to believe that the same institutions that built these automatic triggers will suddenly decide to neuter them on short notice based on one bad future. They will not. At best, they will soften the corners. I know, he said quietly. And if they do not, I continued, if we sit on our hands and watch the reactor spin up and the exercise begin, then obedience becomes an active choice, not habit. Choice. We will have picked our side. And you are not willing to do that, he concluded. No. Then say the thing you are not saying, he pressed. Say what you want me to sign up for. I let the silence stretch long enough to be sure. When the test begins, I said at last, I intend to shut it down. Not through memos, through hardware, if necessary by seizing the controls at Station Moros and locking out the remote commands. He stared. You are talking about mutiny. I am talking about preventing a war, I countered. They are the same act to the people who will write your charges, he replied. Yes. He rubbed his hands over his face. And if you are wrong? If somehow the Ashman lied, or we misread his data, or the chain does not hold this time, what do you tell the widows of the men who die when loyalists come to take back their control room? The question landed. It was the same one I had been trying not to phrase. I tell them I refused to gamble the world on the comfort of obedience. I tell them I picked the risk where my own hands were dirty instead of the one where I could pretend I was just following orders. He dropped his gaze to the floor, to the scuffed line of his boot soles. You know they will call us traitors. Even if the war does not happen, especially then, no one up there will want to admit you were right. I know. He lifted his head again. You could walk away. Accept reassignment. Get yourself removed on medical grounds. Go back to some desk in Geneva and let some other poor bastard deal with this. That was my father's trick, I replied. He tried to shut it down from the inside and died with the gate anyway. I am not sure walking away would change anything except whose name goes on the wrong side of history. He studied me, long and careful. You are leaving me one path if I want to look you in the eye later, he concluded. I am leaving you any path you want. You can report this conversation and step away. You can argue with me and fail to convince me. You can help me and curse me. I will not drag you into this blind, but I am going to act. For a few heartbeats, the only sound was the faint buzz from the light fixture. Finally, he exhaled. You have a talent for picking fights that cannot be won clean, he muttered. Fine. When the time comes, I will be where I always am. At your shoulder, shouting at you when you do something stupid. He pointed a finger at me. But you listen to me on tactics, he added. You deal with the politics. I deal with keeping our people alive. If I tell you a move will cost a man for nothing, you do not make it. Understood? Understood, I answered. The day the test began, the base felt like a lung drawing in too much air. New personnel arrived in the hours before. Additional security units, technicians, communications teams. Temporary antennas sprouted outside. Extra generators rolled in. The control room filled to the point where men had to angle their shoulders to move around each other. On one wall, a bank of screens showed the war game in the north in sanitized form. Icons crawling over a map. Live feeds of missile units rolling along snow-packed roads. Aircraft taking off from distant runways. On another, reactor control displayed its planned power curve. A smooth rise to full output over the next hour, a plateau, then a controlled descent. On a third, gate operations tracked field stability and sensor readings. And in a quiet, locked section of the facility, our prisoner lay in an improvised medical cell, his leg braced. I had not seen him in person since the day we returned. Men with heavier clearances than mine had taken over his interrogation. Once, in a corridor, I passed a guard from that section. His uniform bore no national mark, just a blank patch. "How is our guest?" I asked. The guard shrugged. "Breathing," he answered. talking when they push him, laughing when they do not like the answers. He is either very brave or very tired of being alive. Has he changed his story? Not where I could hear, the guard replied. He keeps pointing at the same dates, the same chain, drives the officers crazy. It was the only reassurance I was going to get. We did not have a neat plan for the mutiny. We had a few fixed points and a shared understanding. First, everything hinged on the main control room and the manual cutoff Volkov had wired into the reactor valves for our first test. That lever still sat on the analog panel, heavy and mechanical. If we could reach it and lock the controls, we could drop power to the gate and the shaft in seconds. Second, to make that matter beyond our own deaths, we needed to push the future data and our real-time readings out beyond the circle of men who had been burying them. That meant using the UN emergency broadcast channel wired into the facility, a secure communication system meant for disaster alerts and distress signals that cut past some normal filters. Third, we needed time. Not a lot, but enough to throw breakers, send a message, and hold the room until it reached someone who could not ignore it. Chaos, as usual, provided the opportunity. It started in the prisoner wing. I was in the control room when the alarm tripped, a shrill tone over the intercom, followed by a curt announcement. Security breach Sector C. All available units to containment. Repeat, Sector C. The side screens showed the wargame continuing, planes tracing arcs, missiles rolling, oblivious. On our panels, the reactor had just passed half power, the curve rising smoothly. Koval snapped toward the door, hand going to his sidearm by reflex. "What is in Sector C?" I asked, though I knew. He glanced at me. "You do not need to. Our guest," I cut in. "He is not a fool. He knows the timeline. He knows something is happening today." Koval hesitated, torn between duties. "Stay here," he ordered one of his lieutenants. "Maintain the procedure. If anything deviates from the curve, you call it. I want this test clean." Then he strode out, taking half the security team with him. I looked at Amir. He was posted near the consoles as part of our routine presence, one of our rifles slung across his chest, the other members of our squad scattered through the room and nearby corridors. He met my eyes once, then gave the smallest shake of his head. Not yet. We waited. Minutes crawled past. The reactor climbed to 3/4 power. Heat readings from the shaft rose steadily. The gate's field numbers ticked higher, though still well within Volkov's projected safe zone. On the wall map, missile units completed their deployment. Aircraft moved to new holding patterns. "Field stability nominal," Volkov murmured, eyes glued to his monitors. "No anomalies beyond what we saw last time." He sounded almost disappointed that the universe was failing to surprise him. Then a new alert flashed up on one of the outer panels. Bauer, covering medical liaison duty in addition to his usual role, looked up. "Radiation spike in the prisoner wing," he reported. "Minor, localized. That is odd." "Explain," I prompted. He frowned. "The sensors in that sector just logged a short burst. Not enough to hurt anyone, but more than you would expect in a sealed medical cell." Volkov finally pulled his attention away from the gate. "The prison cell has a line-of-sight sensor to the gate field. We had to monitor any leakage that might accumulate there. If something flared, even briefly, it could mean a surge on that side, or a localized disturbance. Or someone shut down the shields around his bed," I muttered. Before we could chase that line, the intercom activated with strained voices. "Containment team to control. Subject breached restraints. We have him in the outer corridor, but he is armed. We need the remote doors sealed." A sharp burst of gunfire cut the rest off. Not a full battle, just a short, violent exchange. On one of the security feeds, a camera view jittered as if knocked. For a moment it showed a hallway, bright strip lights overhead, doors on either side. Our prisoner ducked through the frame, one leg brace dragging, shoulder slamming into a wall for balance. In his hand, he held a compact weapon that could only have come from one of the guards. Two men lay behind him, one motionless, the other clutching a wounded arm. He is heading for the gate, Volkov breathed. Of course he is. Mikhailov's voice cut in from the main line, harder than I had heard it. Control. Lock down that wing, he ordered. Do not let him near the chamber. Use lethal force if necessary. The security lieutenant at the console began tapping commands into his station. On the feed, heavy doors at the end of the corridor started to slide down. Our guest did not slow. He pushed past one half-lowered door, squeezed under another, moving with a limp that looked more like stubbornness than weakness. He knows the layout better than our own men, Amir murmured. How many times has he run this path in other versions? He was aiming that at me as much as at himself. The prisoner was not going to make it to the gate. Too many doors between him and the chamber, too many guns. But he had broken the illusion of control in the room. That mattered. Half the consoles were now streaming security feeds and status updates from Sector C. Men in the control center were arguing, some shouting for more lockdowns, some calling for restraint, others trying to manage the test sequence as if this were just an irritating distraction. Mistakes bred in moments like this. On the reactor display, the curve neared its peak. Full power was minutes away, no more time. I leaned toward Volkov. You wired an emergency cutoff we can pull from here, I reminded him. Manual valves for the shaft. He blinked, still caught between the feeds. Yes, he replied. But that will abort the test. We need full cycle data to... One adjustment from Geneva is already on record, I cut in. Aborting now will look like a safety reaction to the security breach. You can write any report you like. He stared at me, realization dawning. His fingers twitched toward the lever, then away. This is not my call. Then I will make it. I stepped around him, reaching for the cutoff. The security lieutenant saw the motion and moved fast. Major, you are not authorized to... Amir intercepted him, hand on the man's chest. Walk carefully, Amir warned. You do not want to be between him and that switch. The lieutenant's gaze flicked to the rifles near the exits. My men had edged closer to key positions. Zorin by the communications console, another rifleman near the main door, Bauer halfway between the med panel and the lever. In that one breath, everyone realized at once that the lines had shifted. Utkin, Adler's voice came sharp over the speakers. Stand down. That is an order. I put my hand on the lever. Reactor at 80%, Volkov whispered. Sweat stood on his forehead. Field readings climbing accordingly. We are still within projections. There is no technical reason to abort. There is a strategic one, I answered. My fingers tightened. Then I pulled. The lever resisted, then gave with a heavy mechanical clunk that I felt through my entire arm. On the reactor screen, the power curve buckled. Readouts flashed red, then shifted as automated safeties tripped. Warning tones bled through the room, overlapping. The floor carried a faint change in vibration as turbines far below began to spin down. Manual shutdown initiated, Volkov announced, half in disbelief. Flow to the shaft is dropping, thermal output decreasing. Adler's voice cut in, laced with something colder than anger. Major Lev Utkin, you are hereby relieved of command, he snapped. Security will detain you and your squad for gross insubordination and unauthorized interference with critical infrastructure. All units, you will restore control to authorized personnel immediately. No one moved toward me. Amir let out a short breath. Well, he muttered, no one can accuse you of hesitation. I turned to Zorin. Emergency channel, I ordered. Now. He was already halfway there. His hands flew over the comm console, bypassing routine links, bringing up the UN disaster broadcast interface. The system required a set of authorizations to prevent misuse. I keyed in the codes I had while he piggybacked on the signatures from Geneva's own connection. Message ready, he called. We can put it out as a high-priority anomaly alert. It will hit every major operations center tied to UN early warning. Attach the war log summary and the chain reconstruction, I told him. Include our current reactor readings, the gate status, and a note that manual shutdown was initiated on-site due to perceived risk of escalation. Volkov stared at us. "You are going to dump classified data across half the world," he protested. "Yes," I answered. "You will cause panic," he shot back. "You will trigger the very misinterpretation you claim to prevent." "Panic is not our enemy here," I replied. "Silence is." Behind him, the screens showing the war game flicked as new status messages scrolled. Some of the icons changed color. Readiness levels shifting, units moving into different patterns. Adler was still shouting orders through the link, but I tuned him out. His words no longer mattered as much as the ones we were about to send. "Do it," I told Zorin. He hesitated only long enough to glance once at Amir. Amir gave a short nod. Zorin hit transmit. Somewhere beyond our concrete walls, a secure network carried our signal outward at the speed of light, leaping between satellites and fiber lines into rooms where men who had never heard my name would see it flash red at the top of their feeds. We would not know for a while whether they treated it as a glitch, a trick, or a warning worth slowing down for. But at least it would exist outside the grip of the men who had been trying to smother it. The first security team reached the control room 30 seconds later. They came in hard, weapons drawn, but they met barrels in return. My squad and a few of Koval's men who had lingered under the excuse of procedure were in position, rifles up, faces tight. "Drop your weapons," the lead security officer barked. "This facility is under central control. You are under arrest." The rest of his speech dissolved into the tense sound of safeties clicking off. "Stop!" Koval's voice cut in from the corridor behind them. He stepped through the line of armored shoulders, eyes sweeping the room. He took in the pulled lever, the frozen curve on the reactor display, the comm panel still open on the emergency channel. He looked at me, then at Amir. "This is mutiny." "Yes," I answered. He studied me for a long beat. "You believe you just prevented a war. I believe I just made it harder to start one by accident. The war game can still run, the missiles can still roll, but without the spike at this site, the combination the Ashman described is broken. You should have pushed harder within the system. Given us more time." "There was no more time," I answered. Behind him, stern voices crackled in his earpiece. I saw him tense as he listened. "Geneva wants you in cuffs," he told me. "Moscow wants you in a grave. They are still arguing over which jurisdiction is more insulted. I am sure they will reach a compromise." He almost smiled. Then the expression died. "I have to take you in. If I do not, this becomes a wider fracture. Men will start choosing sides based on accent and flag. That helps no one." Amir shifted next to me. "You will not walk him out of here through a hostile line," he growled. "Not unless you make certain promises very clear." Koval's gaze flicked to him. "You want assurances," he guessed. "I want guarantees. For my men, for the prisoner, for the evidence. If you haul Lev away under gunpoint and disappear the rest, you will prove every paranoid fear he just risked his life to address." A burst of angry sound from Koval's earpiece cut off his reply. He pressed a hand over it, listening, then grimaced. "They are moving ground forces toward this location. Not ours. The others. Their satellites picked up our shutdown sequence and your broadcast. They are going into a higher alert posture and blaming us for it." "Which means it worked," I said. "They noticed." "Or it means you just pushed them closer to the edge," Koval snapped. He hesitated one beat too long. One of the security soldiers behind him lost his nerve. He lunged forward, rifle line veering. Not toward me, but toward Zorin at the comm panel. Maybe he thought if he could cut the link, he could put the genie back in the bottle. Amir moved without thinking. He stepped into the soldier's path and drove his shoulder into the man's chest, knocking the rifle line aside. The weapon fired, the shot going wide, impacting a console and showering plastic shards. The room erupted. Some men flinched and tightened their grip but held. Others fired short, panicked bursts, One round caught a comms technician in the arm, another chewed a gouge in the ceiling. 2 shots slammed into Amir. He jerked back as if hit by a sledge, body twisting. The force drove him into me. We went down together, my shoulder striking the edge of a console hard enough to send sparks across my vision. For a heartbeat, all I saw was the underside of the panels and Amir's face inches from mine. His eyes were wide, but not in shock, in irritation. "Damn it," he hissed. "He went low. Should have seen that coming." His voice came thin, like someone talking around a weight on his chest. I pushed myself up on one elbow. The rounds had punched through his vest just under the rib line. Blood spread across his shirt in a dark blossom. Not spreading across, I corrected myself automatically. Just rising. "Medic!" Bauer called, already moving. "Hold your fire!" Koval roared. "Hold your fire, damn you! Stand down, all of you!" The threat of crossfire eased. Rifles lowered, slowly, reluctantly. Bauer slid in on his knees beside us and tore open his kit. "Roll him," he ordered. "Gently." We did. The exit wound on Amir's back looked worse than the entry. Bauer pressed sealing packs over both, his fingers quick and sure. "You are not dying here," Bauer muttered. "I have other appointments today." Amir tried to grin. "You always were overbooked," he wheezed. I held pressure where Bauer directed, my hands slick. In those moments, the rest of the room shrank away. Alarms, arguments, the distant movement of the war game on the screens. It all blurred to a low smear behind the more immediate reality of my friend's faltering chest. "Talk to me," I told him. "Tell me how stupid I am. You enjoy that?" He tried a breath and winced. "You are moderately stupid," he managed. "But very stubborn. That is worse." His hand scrabbled at my sleeve, then found it. "You do not get to waste this," he forced out. "You hear me? You do not get to decide later that it was too hard and fall back in line. You carry this." "I know," I whispered. "Good." His fingers tightened for a moment, then loosened. "Then I can rest." Bauer cursed under his breath. "I cannot stop this inside this room. He needs a surgical team and a lot of luck. I can give him neither here." Koval stepped closer, face stiff. "The med team is on its way," he said quietly. "If the roads hold." He was not lying, but we all saw the odds. We got Amir onto a stretcher. They carried him out with the same urgency we had used on the prisoner, feet pounding down the corridor. He did not look back. When the door closed, the control room felt different. Colder, somehow, and not just from the air. Koval faced me fully. "This will not be clean. What you did today will be argued in every capital for years. Men will accuse you of treason, and others will whisper that you saved them. But they will not invite you to the table for that argument." I did not expect an invitation. He gestured toward the reactor panel. "You broke the test," he went on. "The shaft will cool. It will take time and effort to bring it back to this level, if we can. That alone will slow the process." He nodded toward the comms console. "And your broadcast has already hit," he added. "I am seeing responses come in on side channels, demands for clarification, requests for live feeds. The war game just got a lot less fun for everyone trying to run it." One of the screens shifted, showing a new cluster of icons at the top of the map. Not attack tracks, communications links. "Back channels," I murmured. "They are talking. They are yelling," Koval corrected. "And in that noise there may be a chance for someone with sense to wedge their foot in the door." He turned to his men. "Stand down," he ordered. "For now, no more shooting our own in front of foreign monitors. We will sort culpability when no one hangs missiles over our heads." They obeyed, some reluctantly, some with visible relief. I let my shoulders sag, just a fraction. We had not ended the danger. We had only shoved it off its original trajectory. Maybe that would be enough. Maybe it would just rearrange the pattern of ruin. Either way, the next decisions would not be mine. Within the hour, they put me in restraints and moved me to a secure holding cell. The cuffs were tight, but not as tight as the ones they had put on the man from the Ash world. I tried not to think about what that symmetry meant. Months later, the world was still here. I watched it in pieces. My cell was not in a forgotten bunker like Station Moroz. It sat inside a modern detention wing under a cooperative security facility near a city whose name they never bothered to mention aloud. The walls were smooth, the door heavy, the camera in the corner unblinking. They let me walk in a small yard for an hour each day. 3 concrete walls, one side barred, a thin stripe of sky overhead. The sky varied, sometimes clear, sometimes overcast, sometimes streaked with contrails from aircraft whose courses I no longer tracked. News reached me filtered through guards, clipped comments, and the occasional permitted report. There had been no nuclear exchange. The war game in the north had completed on a reduced scale and then been abruptly suspended due to unexpected anomalies in early warning data. Both sides blamed technical issues, then quietly praised their own restraint. International panels convened to discuss automated escalation risks. A task force announced new guidelines for how anomalies like gate readings at strategic sites would be handled, emphasizing human oversight. No one mentioned Station Moroz by name. Officially, what happened there was still classified under layers that felt like sediment. Adler visited once, early on. He stood on the other side of the cell door's small window, hands behind his back. His hair looked thinner than it had in the briefing room. Or maybe I just had more time to notice. "You cost us a great deal. You are welcome." He did not smile. "Regardless of whether your actions contributed to de-escalation, you violated direct orders, compromised sensitive infrastructure, and broadcast classified data in a way that could have destabilized everything we are meant to protect." He paused. "Officially, you will face a tribunal," he added. "Unofficially, there are those in several capitals who are quietly grateful that someone forced a pause at the right moment. They cannot say so in public. That does not mean they do not exist. That gratitude will not rewrite the charge sheet," I answered. "No," he agreed, "but it may affect whether you leave this place in a box or in a vehicle with darkened windows and a new set of restrictions." He studied me. "Would you do it again, knowing the cost?" I thought of Amir's hand on my sleeve, of the broken city under the Ash World sky. I thought of my father underlining a line in a log that no one listened to. "Yes." Adler nodded once, as if he had been expecting that. "You broke the chain. Or at least kinked it. We will spend years untangling the consequences. Do not confuse that with vindication. I do not need vindication. I needed to be able to live with myself long enough to sit in this cell." He huffed quietly. "Philosophy. From a man in handcuffs. Be careful. They will think you are enjoying this." He left without saying anything about Amir. It took another guard, weeks later, to tell me. "Haddad did not make it," the man mentioned as he handed me a meal tray. "Died in surgery. They gave him a medal and your share of the blame." I held the tray without seeing it. Later, when I was alone, I sat on the narrow bed and tried to picture Amir's funeral. The men lined up, the flag, the speech. Whatever they said about him, it would not mention the moment when he stepped between a nervous trigger finger and our comms operator. He would go down as a casualty of an internal disturbance at a sensitive site. Maybe his family would get a sealed letter. Maybe not. I reached into the small box of personal belongings they had allowed me and took out the armor fragment. It was a jagged piece of composite from our prisoner's leg brace, about the size of my palm. The edges were uneven where they had cut it off to build a proper medical support. The surface bore scorched patches and a faint imprint of a serial number from whatever original part it had been before someone hammered it into a new life. It should have been destroyed with the rest of the contaminated gear. I had palmed it during the chaos after the shutdown, slipped it into a pocket, then into the box that followed me here. Now I turned it over in my hand, feeling the ridges under my fingers. Somewhere in a branch of the world that lay on the other side of the gate, men were still walking on braces like this. Children were still learning to grow up under a dead sky. For them, nothing had changed. We had not erased their suffering with our choices. We had only created another path where maybe someday someone would not have to learn those lessons the hard way. It was a poor sort of comfort, but it was real. In our timeline, the gate had been shut down after the incident. The official story, such as it was, called it a structural compromise in the shaft. Engineers declared the risk too high to operate. Orders went out to seal the chamber, to pour concrete and steel between our world and the ring. They did not fully dismantle it. No one could quite bear to destroy a doorway, even a dangerous one. But they buried it deep under layers of prudence and fear. Sometimes, when sleep would not come, I imagined a future where someone dug it up again. Maybe wiser, maybe not. Maybe with records of what had happened here. Maybe without. Maybe some version of me would be waiting on the other side, older but no less stubborn, holding a similar shard of armor and hoping someone would listen this time. In the yard, on clear days, I could see a slice of the sun. It climbed, it fell. It still had the strength to cast hard light on my cell bars and warm the concrete under my feet for a little while before the evening cooled it. That mundane motion felt like the most miraculous thing in the world. I sat on the edge of the bed, the armor fragment resting in my palm, and watched a narrow bar of sunlight slide gradually across the far wall. It stopped just short of the door and hovered there, bright against the dull paint. For a moment, in that small patch of brightness, I imagined I could see ash drifting, not in this cell, but in that ruined chamber on the other side of the buried gate. A man in scrap armor lying on a metal cot, listening for changes in the field. I closed my hand around the fragment. "We did what we could," I murmured. "To Amir, to my father, to the man from the ash world. The rest is theirs now."